world does not give a shit about anything mediocre. The only way to get to that place where you want to be CEO, to like climb this up, is to get great at something. You don't need to be great at everything, but you've got to be great at something. The major difference between a specialist and a generalist is that a specialist has a line. There's a lane. Well, how do you make a lane? You got to draw lines.
Yeah.
If we change the word lane or line to the word boundary, a specialist has boundaries. I don't do that. I just do this. And greatness only comes out inside of a very narrow lane. Been a day for both of us.
I'd say so.
Yeah. Okay. Well, first, glad you're here. I'm really excited about today. And I know that it's probably timely that we're having this conversation.
Yeah, I'd say so.
I think just for context, let's start with, you've been working on a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
What are those things?
Well, they've kind of changed over time. But I'd say where we're at right now, it's everything SaaS, so software as a service. It's building a community around like software acquisitions, actually acquiring a SaaS company like myself, and doing a little bit of like due diligence around those companies. So all of the things that are away from, also having a W-2, which takes up a lot of time as well. Being a software engineer, that's why I got into the SaaS side. So I guess those four major things, no big deal.
Okay. So if I know SaaS has been your like main, not just your income, but sort of your passion at the same time.
Yeah.
It's also been something that you are actively pursuing beyond the W-2.
Yeah.
So what's that dream? Like, walk me through, like, if you could wave a magic wand and it was all said and done, what would you like to do?
I'd like to be running a SaaS company that's like growing. We're learning how to like build a great product. Probably be in charge a little bit more on the product side and like direction of the product, as like the engineering head, right? And growing a company to like $100 million valuation plus. Right. So maybe it's doing, more acquisitions, learning a little bit of the business side. Because right now I come from strictly the engineering side, but I am interested in what it looks like to bring different businesses together and actually grow them. I've always kind of walked a line between being super analytical, but also really enjoying people at the same time. So I really like to figure out what that cross would look like. Since I haven't really walked it, I don't know exactly what that would look like. I feel like the initial would be like, hey, jump into a CTO role, and then maybe dabble into like maybe moving over into a CEO role of like a larger SaaS company and like building it with like a really great group of people I really love, good partners that I really trust, and focusing on just like a buy and hold strategy for like a long period of time and just, building something that lasts, basically.
Oh, that's nice. And feels like the rug just got swept out from underneath you, huh?
Yeah, unfortunately, a few hours ago. So that's why this is a good timing.
Good timing.
Yeah.
So how are you feeling about probably starting at square one? May feel like that?
It definitely, it does. I think logically I catch myself understanding like, hey, I've met other people. I have other, I know I can ask around and like, there's always another opportunity. But also letting myself sit with the fact that there's like that disappointment, I guess. Right. And maybe even a little bit of kind of knowing it's for the better. I saw some signs in the past, like it's been almost like a year or two that like I've been working with a partner of mine who just, told me basically like, hey, I'm going to focus elsewhere and like, we're just not going to do this. And they're the majority of the funding and all that. So it's like, okay, that's tough. But at the same time, knowing that it's probably for the best, like that wasn't their main focus. And so it was not really getting as far. And I felt like even though I had partners, it was a lot on me in a lot of ways. So also, I guess maybe a little bit of disappointment in there, thinking like, on my end, like what should I have done? Should I have, figured out what I've been doing earlier? Should I have just never bothered? Like, should I have sussed out like this partnership more? And like, should I have talk to him first. Like there were definitely like some warning signs, but at the same time, like as of it being today, there was like no indication. It was kind of like a kind of getting blindsided. So there's I'm still kind of figuring out like which things, and it changes, from time to time. I know all of them have a little bit of truth, but definitely navigating it.
Well, two things stand out in the way you describe that. One, it sounds like you're adopting, like, what did I do wrong from a choice that you didn't necessarily have a responsibility to, but also that I think it's easy in moments like this to adopt a stance that everything that you've done to this point is wasted.
It's definitely the initial reaction. Yeah. Like right when I heard the news, right? Like right when I saw that email, it's like, oh shit. Like what? Yeah. It's like, oh, I wasted, a year or two of time, effort, whatever. Right. That is the first reaction. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, these situations happen more frequently than it feels like. Because when you're in it, you've been focusing on this for a year, 2 years. But these combinations of partnerships, of services, of products, of teams happens a lot. Mm-hmm. And if we can recontextualize some of this, what we might find is that there's actually I wouldn't call it a silver lining. That's a bit of a played on phrase. I do, though, think that this is a great indicator for your progress to be identified and for you to really get clear on what you want from moments like this. So yeah, we can dig a little bit and figure that out. Why does it feel like your fault?
Like I said, like, I even had conversations with my wife where I was like, it probably wasn't necessarily the best partner. Like it was pretty obvious, and he even admitted it, is like the big reason why he's, kind of moving on is because he's not like 100% in the SaaS space. Like he's doing other acquisitions. He has other things in business that he's really more into. And even he has apologized for like not really being in it very much. And so I was just taking on more of a burden, which was fine. Cause I'm just like, I'm finding a way to do what I need to do to make this happen, because this is where I want to go. And so, I think looking back, it's like, was I just afraid to do what I knew I needed to do and actually cut that partnership off myself? Like, would I be in a different place now or further along if I had recognized it and just had the hard conversation and been like, hey man, it really doesn't seem like you're in this. And, after the fifth apology, like I had like the initial conversation, but never the hard one of like, hey, you're either in it or out, and this is what it looks like. And it's fine either way. Like, doesn't make you a bad person or whatever, right? I just need to know as we go forward, like, can you give me this level of commitment? If not, that's totally fine. I need to move on. And if I had that conversation in January or February, would I already have new partners lined up? Would I, be further along? Those kind of thoughts, as far as like, what could I have taken on myself and learn from this experience to move forward, basically.
Well, it's easy to say from a perspective of hindsight, I would love to have done that a long time ago. I would love to do it earlier, which I think when we talk about hindsight and we say, I wish I would have done it earlier, what we're really saying is I've learned a lesson. Because if you would go back and do something different, you have learned a lesson.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That is the lesson. I also hear in this that when these moments happen, you're probably taking on a lot more responsibility than is probably due you. There are choices that he's made. There are choices that you both made to make this thing go. But you have no responsibility to choices somebody else makes.
No.
What I think is critical in a junction like this, though, when you're pursuing a dream, is to review how much permission someone else was giving you to pursue it. Because when we partner up with somebody, I've learned this over countless partnerships, what we often look for in a partner is a missing puzzle piece within us. They have something that we don't feel we have.
Mm-hmm.
So we sort of look for the gap to be filled by somebody else, and therefore doesn't matter whether they're actually a good partner, doesn't matter if they're actually a good fit, doesn't matter if they're actually as committed. We're just looking for the puzzle piece.
Yeah.
So what was that puzzle piece?
The credibility when it comes to like business in general. Like he's built 3 businesses, right? I've never owned my own, haven't been, an entrepreneur in the past. He brought a lot of legitimacy. On top of like capital, but like that you can find capital elsewhere, but it really like,
yes.
I was never afraid. It's cool. It's like, well, I don't want to lose the capital if I already have it. But at the same time, I think the biggest thing was not really trusting myself that, I could pull off something. And I mean, realistically, I'm not going to walk in to, to people who are going to fund this. Cause like we still needed to find outside funding. We were going to raise funds, but, I wasn't going to walk in alone, most likely, and give people the kind of confidence they need to see to take down like a $10 million plus deal, right? Like, 5 to 10 million, like that probably wasn't going to happen. So like, I did need something like that. So like, it was maybe partially true. And also I was relying on it so much that I wasn't willing to look at, maybe that wasn't the right person. He's probably not, the only one who has, business experience is looking into like software acquisitions, but in my head, I think that's probably where that like block was.
Great. So we can then focus on instead what kind of steps can you take to either build that confidence, or how can we set some parameters for what kind of partner you'd want to have in this, not you feel you have to have in this, because those are different, right?
Yeah.
The idea that you could have a business partner that provides credibility is can still be there, but wanting credibility is different than needing credibility. And when you have an internal dialogue and when you've registered your own credibility, now you're coming from a place of want, essentially love versus lack.
Yeah.
We covered that in a different podcast, lack versus love. I think my harder struggles with finding the right business partners has largely been that lack or love piece. Here's what I lack, or here's what I don't think I have. So I'm going to select a partner that can just be that. But if I really look back at what I was doing, I was selecting a partner that made me feel that I got whatever it was I needed, which is really important to distinguish, right? Because in that manner, if I want to feel credible and they make me feel credible, it doesn't matter. Like I'm going to ignore the rest of the puzzle.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to pay attention because I'm getting a need met that's like really important. Like make me feel credible. And then I'll ignore all the red flags that are there for, and business partnership is a big deal. Like you are effectively marrying somebody.
Yeah.
So it's good that this has happened before all of the papering.
Exactly.
But it is still important to look at like what's going to make you feel credible. So let's turn the axis on a dial real fast. What do you feel would make a company, a group of people, other engineers or software designers say, Alex doesn't know what he's doing?
I mean, when it comes to the acquisition process, I know some things like kind of anecdotally, like I've been learning a lot, but I haven't actually lived it. Right. So like there's plenty of conversations. Like, I mean, I was driving the like intro calls with prospective like sellers, and I mean, the overall, they actually went fairly well. However, I'm sure it's pretty obvious. Like I'm not a professional like M&A guy, like mergers and acquisitions. And in one call, in a couple calls, actually, I think it was a little bit of an advantage in some ways. Like I was genuinely just like curious about the people, and like I got really good responses in that way. However, I don't know if that necessarily made them want to transact with us in any way, shape, or form. And I felt like I was definitely relying on like, we had like a professional buy side advisor on there he's the professional side, right? He's like, hey, I do M&A all day long. And then also like felt like I was diverting a lot of like, okay, now we want to get down into the business, and I don't know what to ask. I'm out of my depths, and it's, easily, right? So I guess that's where I felt like, all right, I'm lost. Like, I'm willing to go down this road, but I'm very quickly going to get lost, and I'll keep trucking. But like, yeah, I guess that's kind of where I was coming from. I kind of lost what exactly I was answering, but
well, if they're going to look at a basketball player and judge the basketball player on how well he swings a golf club, they're probably going to find plenty of weaknesses.
Yeah.
But you also know your lane.
Yeah.
Confident in your lane?
Absolutely.
Okay. So one thing that's easy to, I think, structurally conversate about really fast is what's your lane? Because when we're trying to cross over into different application, we tend to assume that everything has to change rather than changing with a small degree of variation. If, for example, you were to take, someone that knows textiles and fabric and making clothing and put them into making shoes and footwear, there's some variation there, but they have a basis of certain things. They would understand supply chain, they would understand production and costs and shipping. Like they would have a basis of that. Is it a direct translation? No, but the Venn diagram overlaps pretty well. You might be moving into this terrain where the Venn diagrams they're so far apart that it feels like there's a huge departure from your lane, and therefore you have no credibility. But as long as you stay in your lane and keep that Venn diagram slightly overlapped, you actually have a lot of skills to lean on. When we look for a partner, or we look for somebody that can provide added credibility, if we do that from a place of, I know my lane, I know where I'm great, I know where I can bring absolute magic, and I also know where my line stops, then what we're looking for is a complement of a partner versus someone to rescue us when we don't feel credible ourselves. But I think a lot of that has to do with feeling like you're out of your lane.
I would say so. Yeah.
So do you think it's more valuable to be a specialist or a generalist?
Honestly, don't know. I guess probably more valuable to be a specialist.
Why specialist?
Just because you can get deeper and provide more specific value that it really depends on what value you're trying to provide, right? So if you really know a certain topic super well, you can do really well on that one. I mean, a generalist at the same time can bring multiple topics together and bring other people together that know things super well, better than others. So I guess it depends, but I know I tend to enjoy being a generalist more so than an actual specialist, and maybe I get a bit confused with what you're saying is, at least if I'm picking up what you're putting down, I definitely am walking into the scenario of acquisitions and partnership, saying I'm the tech guy, right? I work at Microsoft, and I have all of this credibility over here and whatever this lane, and I want to get to but I'm trying to basically be this lane, which is line up the acquisitions, figure out how to transact, do all these things that aren't necessarily anything I've done and aren't necessarily from the same skills from over in this lane at all. Right?
So here's the root of the question. Do you want to be a generalist? Or is that just a role you feel you need to take on?
I feel most of the time, it's probably a role I feel I need to take on. I definitely I recently got a lot of feedback from people that I know pretty well, and just about my strengths and weaknesses. And one of them was that I'm adaptable. I assess a situation and I just sort of fill the role that I feel is lacking. And I can be in a group of people and identify all right, someone needs to take control. There's no one's paying attention to the, I don't know, the time limit and the structure of the conversation. I'll take that over. Or whatever's going on, right? Or if I feel okay, that's being taken care of, we need someone who actually can reel the conversation back, and okay, cool, I'll do that. And so I'm probably approaching these kind of the same way, where I'm maybe I didn't intentionally put together this partnership, like me and him and the other guy. And so I just assessed what was going on, and I'm like, cool, we're weak here. Let me take it. Let me do my best to like take this over, because I don't necessarily trust that they're going to. And let's just see where we get.
So I'll make a statement that I've had to say to my former self that I think was my challenge. Chameleons don't get paid for being a color, because they're not a color. But I think the most important thing that you can do is pick your color.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're being a chameleon, you're constantly changing color, you'll never get paid for a color. When we're aspiring to make some kind of quantum leap, when we're building this identity of like, I could see a vision.
Yeah.
I think what we do is we try to make them happen through the lens of like changing ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
which is a total skill to adapt, but we end up misappropriating the skill. The skill of adapting needs to get applied in the space, not above the space. So your skill and strength of adapting is going to be great when you're in the shit with the companies and you're trying to figure out solutions and you're staying in your skill set. When you try to be adaptable outside of your skill set, it just looks like you're changing colors all the time. And if anyone is watching where you're in one conversation on buying a business and you're all of a sudden purple talking about business, and then you're yellow talking about SaaS, and you're green talking about the M&A experience that you have, all they see is someone that is constantly morphing to fit the environment. Most people don't know how to disconnect that from someone faking it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that you are, but if you're constantly changing colors, what the average person would see is, this guy doesn't know. Even though you're doing your best to say, like, these are not my strengths, I'm just here to ask questions.
Yeah.
What they see is something different, because they just see a chameleon that keeps changing colors. When you get secure enough in who you are and the strength and the value that you have to offer, which is where we're headed, what you'll notice is that you're just the same color, and you can ask the same questions on both sides, but you never depart from your color. And I think what ends up happening through conversations like that is someone learns to say, like, Alex is a specialist. He's really, really, really good at this. That's why we need him. While being a generalist is good, generalists only are effective after a certain amount of characteristics can be met, because you have to be, you need like 10 boxes checked, not 5.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to be really, really wide to be effective as a generalist. Inside of who you are, if your specialist skill is really high, then build a name for yourself under that. Build a reputation under that. Build the credibility under that. And all of a sudden, people will seek you out for what you do, but you won't have to be a generalist. That will require you to commit to a color. And it may feel even scarier to commit to being a specialist, which I actually think is probably what's happening.
Yeah, I would agree. Sometimes it can be hard to pick. Yeah.
What's your fear about being so good that when people are like, I want to buy a business and I know just the guy to call, being that guy?
I mean, right now the biggest fear is just being like, do I really know how to help? I mean, I know I do to an extent, but I don't feel like I necessarily have enough expertise to qualify, I guess, as that specialist yet.
I disagree with that. I think that you have enough experience. What you don't have is enough belief in your experience to take your adaptability and make it all come together. I'm going to say that differently.
Okay, I'll say I'm listening.
If you're adaptable, you don't need to have every example mastered. right? What makes someone really good at, let's use sports as an example. What makes someone really good at sports is that they've mastered a couple of things that allow them to handle a situation that is rather unpredictable with a degree of confidence.
Yeah.
So a game of basketball, a game of soccer are great examples because both of them are very fluid. So as a coach, you can't run a drill that's going to be exactly like the game. I can't teach players how to do it exactly like the game is going to be because the game is going to be random. The game has that element to it. But what we can do is we can master the fundamentals so well that when you're put in a scenario that is randomized, it is fundamentalized by your mastery, right? You can, Kobe was good at this. Jordan was good at this. LeBron has been good at this. They're so fundamentalized that when you put them in a situation that's different, they know how to make it look like they've done it 1,000 times.
Yeah.
But if you expect yourself to show up to a SaaS company and deal with the same problem that you've dealt with somewhere else, you're putting yourself at a loser's edge already by saying, well, I've never dealt with these particulars. Like, fundamentally, they're going to be the same problems if you zoom out far enough. But then you don't get to use your adaptability. Your adaptability is probably your superpower. But if you use that within your lane, then you can go in and say, oh, this is just like what I dealt with in Microsoft. This is just like what I dealt with my friend's company. This is just like what I dealt with last Thursday. It's a different name, different title. Maybe one person's using different software. One person's on Scrum. Who knows? But all of these strengths that you have get maximized when you remain adaptable to the situation and just go in with your expertise detached from the particulars. AKA, if you have mastered the fundamentals, then it doesn't matter what the situation is. That's where your adaptability will actually shine. But if you dissociate these things and you segregate adaptability from your experience, you actually minimize your adaptability. It doesn't become a strength anymore. It becomes a weakness. AKA, I'll be the M&A guy and the questions guy and the business inquisition guy. I'll be all these things. Now your adaptability becomes a problem versus staying in your space where it becomes your strength.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
So here's where the fun part of the dig today is. Zooming back up to where you're a generalist probably feels really empowering because you're learning all these skills, but it's a great avoidance tactic. So there's some kind of avoidance of, I want to be the master. Why don't you want to be the master? You've been doing this a long time.
I mean, the technology side, yeah. I don't know if there's maybe something. I don't know. For me, I know I always get stuck between like the analytical side and the people side, and I don't know what it is that I can't. I feel like I need to choose, and I can't really choose. And I'm not. I don't know. I don't know if I've ever really gotten on that question. I feel like before I just like, oh, like I'm just a bridge, and like that's the specialty. But I don't.
Oh, great. But why not? What scares you about becoming
being that
so
bridge?
Fucking good? Yeah, so good that no one could deny you at all. You're that good at what you do. That is a very important bridge, by the way.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I don't know. One thing that like definitely has come up like in the past is I'm afraid I need to get things right to the point where I can be afraid to fail and like a little bit afraid to succeed. It's like in the past, always I felt like I got love when I got things right? Like always had to have straight A's on my report card. Like if I ever got a C, I was told I wasn't allowed to play baseball. It's what I love to do. And then on top of that, I feel like even heavier, as the fact that like I've been divorced, and there, in a way, I know like I had certain like shortcomings as far as who I wanted or who I felt like I should have done or who I should have been. As far as things that I didn't get right. Like there are things that obviously everyone has some blame in that. And I'm almost afraid that if I go and do that, like I can screw up. And I'm remarried now and super happy. And I've done a lot of work to get where I'm at. And I feel like I'm damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't. Because if I do go and do this and fail, there's a part of me that's afraid, like even though I know logically my wife would not leave me, that's like the almost like the emotion behind it, right? Because of my experience in the past. It's like that, okay, like you go and you fail, or you don't go and you don't fail, then I'm like, actually, I know that if I don't do it, then I know that that's probably what will, not that she will leave me. It's just that like in my head, it's like, oh, like that's where you're messing up. Like you need to do this and you need to go and like fulfill this. But if you do and you fail, then you're still afraid to like that you lose that love, right? That you fail. So that's, I don't know. That's the bind that comes up in my head.
Really helpful. And I want to remind you, we put it on shirts. Maybe it's time for me to mail you a shirt. I am well, I'm worthy, I'm enough, I'm lovable. If lovability is the thing that feels like it would be compromised, then what we can probably link is that this pursuit of mastery probably will feel like isolation. It would move you away from everyone, because when you're that good, you're in a totally different world.
Yeah. And there's a sense of an unknown there. It's almost like I don't even necessarily know what the next step is in that direction. And then I'm like, oh, well then maybe I shouldn't be going there. Or, like, then things will come up and it's easier to just convince yourself to be like, okay, like stick out just maybe a little bit, but you're right. Like maybe not too far.
And the next level will always come with the unknown. Everyone listening, everyone around us, everyone in communities like we're in will always fear the unknown. And the unknown is what the next level is. Like you can't known the next level because it's so different. However, what is important to address here is, why does it feel like becoming the master would isolate you? Because that distance where you are becoming more and more practiced, more and more refined, more and more skilled is not a journey that will isolate you. It doesn't have to.
Mm.
But if it's connected to something like I'm gonna be alone, then anything attached to mastery you're gonna walk away from. AKA, I'm gonna go be a generalist because that's more comfortable. You know what a generalist is in? They're in everyone, right? They can blend anywhere. It's a chameleon. So that whole, like, if you start to look at it this way, mastery will isolate me, but becoming a generalist will keep me connected. All we're really doing is trying to find connection. That's all that this puzzle is about. So you may feel more connected as a generalist than as a master.
Yeah.
But there's still an avoidance of, I'm going to do what's necessary to become a master because I don't want to be disconnected.
Yeah, I hadn't really seen it that way before. I hadn't seen that connection. Yeah, especially, I mean, connection was even one of my, major values. I mean, it still is. Even though I kind of changed up the wording on some of them, like that's definitely a very common theme is connection. It's extraordinarily important to me.
Well, we also had a situation where a partner kept showing, hey, this isn't probably going to align with my long-term. And what did we keep? We kept the connection.
Mm-hmm.
So if we know that's a driver, then we have to ask the question, what is it about becoming so good at something that makes you feel like you'd be isolated? What example do you have? What belief do you have about being so good at something that would make you feel like you'd be isolated?
Kind of trying to think of just make what examples I've had, because that's probably where they'd be coming from.
That or simple things like it's lonely at the top, right? simple phrase that we use all the time. We're like, well, if you're going to be, I don't know, if you're Taylor Swift, you're alone all the time. Like, is that true? I don't know. I doubt it.
Yeah. That doesn't really feel, I don't feel that really hit necessarily, like hearing that. I do feel like connection's on the right route though. I don't know if I necessarily feel like I'll be lonely.
Connection and lonely don't necessarily need to be synonyms here.
Yeah.
It could be that the pursuit of becoming a master feels like it would take so much time that you would lose connection, or take so much practice and deliberation and work and energy that you would have to self-isolate.
That feels much closer. Like I definitely feel like the pursuit of it is potentially sacrificing some connections, as far as, maybe that means, having to spend less time with my wife, or, not being able to see, certain friends or family as much. There might be something down that road. Trying to think of some examples of where maybe that, like, the decisions I've been making and why I was making them, or like why, maybe like reasons for even probably procrastination, right? Like, even if I'm not necessarily spending, not necessarily spending time on things that I feel like I should be doing that would make me, say, a specialist in, M&A, or, the software, business acquisition side.
Let's try a different angle.
Okay.
The major difference between a specialist and a generalist is that a specialist has a line. There's a lane. Well, how do you make a lane? You got to draw lines.
Yeah.
If we change the word lane or line to the word boundary, a specialist has boundaries. I don't do that. I just do this. Right? I think of, like, it's a strange example, but the movie Pulp Fiction, right? When Samuel L. Jackson and John Travolta, like, can't figure out what to do, they call the wolf.
Yeah.
And, like, they know this guy's just going to come in and he's going to solve the problem. Specialist.
Yeah.
But that guy has so much personality. Like, he's like super boxed in, right? He's got all these boundaries. Like, don't do that. Don't do this. You do what I say, right? Boundaries. What do boundaries represent to someone that wants to remain connected? Division.
Yeah.
The separation is really interesting to start to look at, because if a main value of yours is connection and I'm drawing a line right in the middle, it's going to sever what you may feel is connection. And this idea of becoming a specialist means you say no a lot. It has to,
yeah.
Right? These are the people that I help. This is how I do it. And if you don't like that, this ain't for you. And that requires a lot of command of yourself to be able to say, this is the box that I play in. If you don't play in this box with me, then we just don't play. We don't connect.
Yeah.
And that may be part of why generalist feels more attractive and more alluring than being a specialist, because you would need to have a shitload of boundaries.
Possibly. One thing that popped in my mind is also just the concept that I just enjoy new problems, like I like the concept of problem solving, and I'm just like, oh, if I'm a specialist, like, I get bored.
Ooh,
that kind of popped in my mind.
Nice.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not true at all.
Yeah.
It's debunkable very easily, but it's good to know that that's coming up.
Yeah.
Right? That if I'm a specialist, I solve the same problem over and over and over and over and over and over and over, and I get bored.
Yeah. It's like I enjoy, like, novelty. Like, I enjoy solving new problems and learning new things like constantly. And yeah, I wouldn't want to, feel stuck. Like, okay, this is all I do. Like I've always seen myself as being like a serial entrepreneur. Like after 3-5 years, right? Like I have a feeling as I walked in, like I might buy a business first and be like a CTO, and then maybe learn how to be a CEO, and then learn how to actually put together multiple businesses, like into portfolio, and then like I'm like constantly doing the next thing, and like the next skill or like the next problem to solve, because like once I solve a problem, I can become so disinterested that I literally cannot make myself do it again. And so I guess maybe I'm like, I can be worried that being a specialist is just, it's like boring.
Notice that we're stacking up a lot of reasons not to be a specialist and a lot of reasons to be a generalist. They're completely fabricated. Is Messi a generalist or a specialist?
Specialist.
You think he gets bored?
Probably not.
Why not? He solves the same problem every game.
I mean, I guess I can understand it because I played baseball and I never felt like I was solving the same problem every time. Like every situation's a little bit different. And yeah, like you were saying before, like I understand, like you learn the fundamentals and you learn how to apply them in however the game unfolds. So like I thought that was a good analogy that I definitely understood. It's like I was, especially as like a catcher where I'm like, okay, I have to read everything that's going on. You're like, I would play a game after game after game after game, and I never got tired of playing baseball. I don't think I ever showed up being like, I don't want to be here today. But maybe I'm not applying that same logic to, like software acquisitions or really any other professional thing I've done.
It would be what you may be doing is similar. If you look at your last like 2 years, it would basically be like every Saturday you play a different sport, expecting to get good at any of them.
Yeah.
That's a pretty bananas thing to try, right? Again, not a literal example, but if every Saturday you took on a new sport, at some point you might be able to draw some connections and say, hey, well, all right, this is kind of like that and similar, and this kind of feels the same, and I learned it. But you would be so short-sighted in developing any kind of skill that's applicable for a level of mastery or success that you'd eventually end up going insane. Like you would literally just waste away at any particular skill or talent. But we do this often. And I think that when really successful people talk about success, they make success look like, when they compress time, they're like giving you a highlight reel of what it took. They make it look like it's exciting all the time. It's generally not. Mm-hmm. Success is a recurring mile marker, like a marathon. It's just another mile, another mile, another mile, another mile. Like it's the mundane over and over until you get so good at it that you can do it without thinking. You become specialized. And specialization is really important. If you don't have any specialized knowledge, if you are a generalist, you have a very different track and set of options available to you. And that might be where some people are. But again, generalist is typically reserved for like beyond specialist. You have to earn the right to be a generalist, typically. But specialized knowledge is really important to be able to activate, to be able to solve problems, and to be able to find novelty. And I think if we look at the evidence that's stacked on both sides, all of the things that we've written can be swapped. Like there's actually a lot of novelty and excitement in being a specialist, because you get to go in and like watch it change. If you're that good, you get to go in and fix it, change it, and then move on to the next one and go solve big problems. There's a ton of connection in that, because what people come to know you as and you build a reputation for is that thing, whether it's being the bridge or it's something different. You also get to completely own a terrain, a space, an area, and proclaim it and say, this is what I'm great at. I also think it is the faster way to credibility. Much, much, much faster.
Yeah.
And if you think of anyone in a particular space, their credibility typically comes from their specialization. We might attribute the word generalist to them, but like think about Warren Buffett. We might say, well, he invests in all these things. No, he's a specialist in investing. That's what he specializes in.
Mm-hmm.
So there's almost very few arguments for being a generalist, especially when you're on this pathway of really expanding. But in order to do that, you'll have to commit, and you'll have to commit pretty hard to a mundane element of repetition. That repetition can be boring from the outside unless the specialist can find the novelty. And I think that given your history in baseball, I mean, you could take 1,000 pitches too when you're at bat, but like every pitch is different. Stadium's different, weather's different, grip on the bat's different, right? There's small, subtle things that make it fun and exciting. If you are waiting for the game to be fun by changing all the variables at the same time, it's impossible to become a specialist. And that sounds like historically what's happened. I'm just going to keep getting wider.
Yeah, I'm going to try something
because that's
new.
Where the fun is.
Yeah.
And how many new pursuits are fun.
Yeah.
Until we recognize that we actually can't get very far because we have to learn. It's like an uphill climb all the time. The thing that I love about coaching is that the more I do, the better I get. And the better I get, the more fun it is to solve problems because everyone has their own angle on it. Just like you have your own angle here on being a specialist versus a generalist. But that doesn't mean that the conversation about specialists and generalists is any different than it is with other people at a core.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the approach has to be different. So I have to learn and master, like, how do I show up to this conversation in a way that helps you, even if the content constructively is the same as someone else might need to hear.
Yeah.
The approach has to be different.
Makes sense. Yeah.
That's like saying, like, sure.
No, it's just like, but if I just be like, I know you're right. Then you give me that pause to make sure that it sinks in that I know you're right.
Well, here's something that I think is important now. It's like, if we really break down your behavior over the last year, have you been running from being a specialist? Have you been avoiding it? Not running, but have you been avoiding what it takes to be a specialist?
Maybe subconsciously I have, mostly based off of the way I think, not necessarily that the pursuits I was going about were not towards a specialist, but the way I was approaching them was against being a specialist, right? Like,
agreed.
Yeah. So with that distinction, yes, I would agree. I walked in just being like, cool, got these two partners. What do we need here? Like, I'll fill that. I'll make sure this kind of, gets done. Here's some weaknesses, even though it has nothing to do with me and like any of my actual experience. And whatever they don't do, I'm just going to do. And yeah, it definitely hasn't worked. So in that way, I probably was actively not being a specialist because I wasn't setting myself up to be one, I guess, or like to be in a position to do it.
Great. How does someone set themselves up to be in position to be a specialist?
I mean, first of all, knowing what they're specializing in, that would probably help.
Very important. Right? Yep.
And then once you do, like you're saying, like drawing those boundaries and then intentionally picking partners. I think that's another thing. Once you know what your specialty is, it's easier to just say no to partners that either overlap or just aren't necessarily complementary, and just sticking to that and not being, I guess, impatient and just grabbing the first ones that are just like, hey, you want to buy a SaaS company? Just like, yeah, sure.
Yeah. That'd be like going to the grocery store to find a business partner. Like,
yeah,
what are the odds that you're going to find someone that matches? I love everything you just said. And the thing that you are very good at, being the bridge, is a really important thing. It's incredibly important. Most companies are dying for a bridge because there's two languages being spoken. There's like engineer and there's business. Or in your case, maybe software and business. And that's a really important translation, because if things get lost in translation, it can be millions of dollars of waste that happen and that occur. If you're going to be a specialist in that, then the harder boundary is going to be saying no to an inviting opportunity that isn't inside of that window. It's a deep commitment to be a specialist. It's a really deep commitment. And I can only say this because I've had to have these inner dialogues about what I do and what I pursue and what I want to become. And it actually makes it much easier when you're like, this is what I'm going to get great at. Because I'm going to say something very punchy. It's for you. It's also for anybody listening. The world does not give a shit about anything mediocre. So the only way to get to that place where you want to be CEO, to like climb this up, is to get great at something.
Yeah.
You don't need to be great at everything, but you've got to be great at something. And greatness only comes out inside of a very narrow lane. Like, I don't want Usain Bolt, as fast as he is, on my soccer team. Because you don't run a 400 or a 100 on the soccer field. You run like 10, 12 yards, and then it's different, right? You're also doing it with a ball. Let him stay in his lane. But when someone great finds their lane and they work really hard and commit to it, amazing things happen for them and for people around them. Just like when you find your lane, it will be great for the companies that you go help. It will be great for your family and friends. It will be great for your clarity, your commitment. It will also be great for your connection, because people will connect with someone that's like, I'm clear on what I'm here for. I don't mess with that. That's not my problem. This is my problem. And it's a big problem. And people pay me a lot of money to fix big problems that nobody else can fix. But I don't touch that. There's something inviting about that, right?
Yeah.
You and I know people like that, where they're like, I don't fix that. Nope. Or I don't do that. Or that's not for me. Or I have no idea what any of you just said. I'm just going to stick to my no. But if you walked into a room where, I don't know, everyone was speaking, I don't know, Hindi, you wouldn't try to pretend to know. You would just sit back eventually and just be like, oh, all right, they're talking about things I don't know and I don't understand. Yeah. So at some point, you'll also have to let go of like trying to fit and be connected to something that you're not connected to, just like you would in a room with languages that aren't known by you. Eventually, you just sit in the room and you're like, man, you guys talk all you want. I can't keep up.
Makes sense. Yeah. When I'm thinking how I would like enter a room, basically is I'd be like, oh, I need to learn what's going on. I need to figure out like, how to speak Hindi. Like, I'm going to be honest that I don't know how to speak it, but yeah, like I'm not going to I don't think I would just be like, maybe in that specifically it's actually a foreign language. Like I'm a little lost in that. Maybe I'll pull out Google Translate, but as far as how I'm actually showing up, in conversations where I know the actual language, it would be much more like, oh, like I'm trying to figure out like what they're talking about or that new field of whatever, even if it's maybe tangential and not specifically exactly where we're going to go. Like, I mean, even just thinking through like the conversation we've had is like, like a kind of partner. I need a partner who has the, I guess, like M&A experience and is credible in that space and wants to move in this direction, and like we connect in a certain way, whereas I can focus on like the bridge portion. I feel like I've known that that's like my, I guess, like superpower for a while, and I've struggled to figure out how to really put it in practice.
Because you're acting as a generalist.
Yeah.
Generalists attract generalists. Specialists attract specialists, because a specialist will be like, I don't know anything about the financing of this business. I need a partner that knows that. And what does a partner that is really good at the financing want when they buy a software company? They want a fucking specialist to be like, oh, I got this.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's what they want, right? That's where the compliment happens. Specialists go to specialists. At a certain point, the only way for you to get a partnership with another specialist is for you to be a specialist. It's the only way.
Yeah.
Because you'll have a better respect and a better mutuality. Hey, that's your lane. I don't mess with that. Hey, Brad's asking about this. I don't touch that. Brad, hey, call Tim. Tim's that guy. I focus on this stuff. Similar to me and what we do here, if I just took everybody's problem and said like, cool, I got you, I'd be way too wide from a coaching perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So we know what problems we solve. We know what kind of avatar we work with. And for someone that does not have a clear vision, that does not know how to focus, feels like they're stuck and they can't break through the next level. Okay. We need to have a conversation to understand if what we do and what we specialize in will fit what you want. If you just want to grow your business, go call a business coach. If you want to break through the ceiling of your career, your wealth, your relationships, your health, and your experiences, if you want all of that, if you're tired of playing in one lane, cool, then we're for you. Mm-hmm. But I think when you become a specialist, what you inevitably have to do on a regular basis is say no. And no is a precursor, at least mentally, in the way that you've described it, to disconnection. Mm-hmm. I think that rewriting that is going to be probably the harder work ahead.
Yeah.
No actually leads to better connection. Even though I'm repelling things, it's leading to better connection inside of the circle than it is outside of the circle. Another way to think about that is like, you and I probably have both had friends that always say yes.
Yeah.
Hey, is this a good idea? Yeah. Hey, is this good? Yeah. Hey, do I look good? Yeah. Like eventually, we don't want friends like that. We want friends who are honest. I want friends who are honest, who tell me the truth, who tell me like, hey, bro, that idea sucks. Or, hey, you didn't show up your best day. Or, hey, that was not your best performance when you're on stage. Like, I want that, because having a yes person does not have the same kind of value. Having a generalist, a yes person, does not have the same kind of value. A specialist can drive value so much higher because they're narrow. Mm-hmm. Rifle versus shotgun.
Yeah.
So this is a good turning point to really look at, like, why have I been avoiding being a specialist? Probably because of the disconnection piece. Mm-hmm. But I think to go back to like the space that you're in, where it feels like, okay, the rug got swept out from under you, it probably did, but probably for an important reason, because I think you were attracting a generalist and trying to be a generalist, and it could never have worked.
Yeah.
Eventually, you would have been discovered, and then it would have all fell.
Yeah, most likely. I would definitely agree that as much as we may have thought we were going to be specialists, like once we acquired the company or something, like we definitely were completely being generalists in like how we were working together, at least on like the acquisition side, for sure.
So think about, let's rewrite what a future conversation would look like, right?
Yeah.
You have a partner. Let's say in this case, it's me. I go in and I'm like, hey, we really love your business. I think it's financeable. Let me understand what's happening on the business front, your metrics, your KPIs, your performance, your org chart. I want to understand your marketing efforts. I want to understand your product. After I understand that and we get the green light on that, I'm going to have you talk to Alex. I don't know anything about software, but this guy can read software like you and I read kids' books. He's good. He's great. He's going to figure out where the gaps are. Because if we can't find the gap, there's no reason to buy. We think we can solve a big problem because you're undervalued and you're underappreciated when it comes to the software side. So after I'm done, I'm sending in the guy. He's like the wolf for software.
That would feel so much better.
Now notice, like, you don't have to pretend. You don't have to like talk about this other shit. You just get to do what you're great at.
Yeah.
I also get to do what I'm great at. Two specialists staying in their lane feels a lot more freeing and probably a lot more connective to what you actually care about.
I would definitely say so. Like, I mean, just hearing that like explanation of that, like playing out that way, I was like, oh my gosh, that would work so much better. Like, that feels so much lighter, right? like, Jesus, where's me just like get on these calls? I'm like, I don't know if I know what I'm doing, but I'm going to get on this. Like, I'm going to walk my way through this and we're going to figure it out one day. Yeah. So much different. Whereas, yeah, if I walked in and it was just like, hey, this whole business side, like we know what questions we want to ask and all that stuff, like, right, like I can help build rapport, whatever. But at the end of the day, it's just like, go in and tell us like how this business or how this technology affects like the business, like this software, like what are we actually looking at here? And then I'd be like, oh, easy, watch this, hold my beer.
I love that. Dude, that energy is awesome too.
Yeah.
Hey, you guys sit down.
Yeah.
You just have fun.
Yeah. Just don't worry about it. I'll make it as like, I'm going to go look and then I'm going to come back and you're going to know exactly what you need to know. Nothing more, nothing less. And you guys will feel like completely comfortable to go forward and do your own thing.
Dude, even the way you say that is different from the remainder of this or the other 50 minutes of this conversation.
Yeah. A lot different.
Because it will set you free, right? When you're a specialist, you're free. When you're a generalist, you have to like always change the colors to like try to match the environment, and it ends up not being you. It's authentic to be a specialist. You say whatever you want when you're a specialist.
Yeah, it's kind of like living in your superpower versus like I dabble in it. Like
yeah.
I guess.
I think that the way forward for most people that are really trying to like build a life, create success, is largely like inverted from what it should be. Because we hear this stuff like, I don't know, fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Like we hear this stuff. So we're like, all right, well, I guess I need to just be in this environment where, you know, it's different for me and I'm going to pretend like I got it going on. And there's a time and a place to step into an environment that you're not comfortable with. But let's do that from a vertically aligned perspective where you can step into a big room and say like, hey, I've never worked on anything Python, but I know everything about what's happening if we just change the language. So I don't need to know about the language. I don't care. What I know better than anybody is communication between the software and the business side, and I'm the bridge. What you guys are dealing with is not a Python problem. What you're dealing with is a people communication problem, and I'm going to translate for you because this is a disaster. It doesn't matter what language you're speaking at the end of the coding. There's a problem. When you can do that, you're going to experience the novelty. You're going to experience the fun of it. You're going to experience the excitement of it, like being a catcher. There's 1,000 different ways to like make sure that happens, but you don't have to change positions every like 4 days to try to like be somebody else. And that may require you to let go of whatever role you feel you have to play, but it will also up your value. And the result of that will be a better dynamic between this business partner that we've now sort of imagined. It will also be a better dynamic with the prospect or company or team or whomever you're working with, engineers who are just like, oh, that's Alex. What does Alex do? Oh, we can answer that question versus, I don't know. He just asks a bunch of questions all the time. Specialization. Always, 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 always.
Yeah. It feels, surprised. I just hadn't really viewed it like even as like specialization, I guess, before, like thinking back, like, oh, like if things were easy, what would it look like? And actually it looks like me specializing, not generalizing and just trying to do what I need to do to get something like across the finish line, basically. Just what I feel like where I've been coming from. Yeah.
And you're probably like 90% of the way to specialized.
Yeah, like I don't necessarily feel like I'm far off. I just feel like I was, I guess, distracting myself and not putting myself in an environment that allowed me to. Right.
Avoiding.
Yeah, exactly.
It's scary. The next level where you are magical at this is different. Like it's totally in the unknown because you will get phone calls about it. You will be asked. You'll have a reputation. That's what it'll be.
Yeah.
And not everyone's going to need to jive with that, but you need to be in a place where you're like, okay, I'm going to break through the ceiling. I'm going to get to great. I'm going to get to the top 5%, right? That to me, that's the number. That's always the number. Like, can you get in the top 5%? Because at that place, you have so much market value that it's going to sort of like snowball fast. Once you break into that level, then it goes quick because you'll build a reputation and people will call you when they have a similar problem because then you get known for solving a problem.
Yeah. And I think it also solves a little bit of the credibility portion, right? Like I feel like I can go into a problem and they should, I feel like, yeah, you should have called me. Like I'm the right person for this.
Yep.
Not just, all right, let's go in and we'll figure it out. Like it's a very different energy. And yeah, I definitely would notice the difference between, like situations I've been in where I'm just like, I have no idea how I'm going to do this, but like, I don't know, like I'll figure it out versus, hey, I know how I'm going to like attack this problem. And sure, there's some unknowns, but overall, I know like, it's in my ballpark, right? Not down the street, like at the basketball court. Yeah.
It's home.
Yeah.
It's home. So your work is now going to be in writing out where your area of specialization is. I would spend some time mapping it and getting it on paper. The more you can scaffold out and describe the problem from multiple tiers and a really high perspective. So not, I help Bob connect with Troy about how to connect this piece of software, but like, oh, team A and team B were struggling with resolving business use case and customer utility. Like they were just battling over that. And we had to resolve what's the business case and what's the customer use case. Cool. That's the problem that I solve. Whatever it is, I'm making stuff up.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that's going to be your lane, let's start getting it on paper so you can see it. And then you can start having conversations with potential partners about how you can help a software company, right? That's the goal. And then they can say, oh, well, that makes sense. If we bought a company, you can, like, you're the axe to go in there and start chopping stuff up. It'll present your value as higher also.
Yeah. And yeah, I feel like it's easier to convey because I'm like, I already know of, it's like I've already kind of been doing some of these things like to build that credibility. Like you're saying, like 90% there of the specialization. Like I've been doing it in certain situations, right? And I'm like, okay, I know when I'm, in a certain situation where it's like, hey, I can work with people to figure out what the actual problem is and how technology solves it and vice versa, right? So, and like I can tell them, oh, here's like 5 examples of when I did that. Easy. Versus I have 0 examples of when like I figured out, how to talk through the valuation of these companies or, how to diagnose their sales pipeline or how we can, put together an acquisition that makes sense. Like, I've got nothing to draw on.
Yep. Easy.
Yeah. Super easy. Huh?
Piece of cake. We got some homework. I'm curious to, I'll follow this journey with you as I always do.
Yeah.
But I think you'll be surprised at how fast this can come together when you get out of your own way and just focus on what you're like, double down. Doubling down is always the answer. It's always the answer. Are you good at it? Cool. Get great at it. Are you great at it? Become a master at it. Are you a master at it? Become a beginner again and relearn all of it over. It's always the answer. So it's a double down function, not width.
Yeah. I can definitely tell. Like I was almost like feeling like, all right, I know I need to like really pick a lane. I've been feeling that general pressure, I guess, right? Of just being like, hey, I really need to focus on software, like SaaS and like, the acquisition side and stuff. I just didn't know what that looked like. Right. But this is definitely very helpful in framing that, which, yeah, I wasn't really sure how to frame that before.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. So you got some homework.
Yep.
I'll follow along. I appreciate you doing this here on like a live episode. I have a feeling that people are going to want to reach out.
Mm-hmm.
If nothing else, just to thank you for being courageous, because this conversation is probably relevant to a lot of people who are,
I hope so,
dancing between these two things. Yeah. So where can people find you if they want to reach out?
Really easy one. Instagram. It's Alex Thielman. It's really easy handle. Probably the best way to reach out to me, and just message me there.
Cool. So give Alex a follow. Give him some love. Dude, I really appreciate you being here and going through it.
Yeah, thanks, man.
And keeping an open mind to all of this as we push all the buttons.
Yeah, and appreciate you having me on. I always love watching you do what you do. You're a rock star at it, man. Always have been.
I appreciate that, dude.
Always love seeing you do your thing. It's actually pretty magical. It's a little harder to see it when it's like directed at me, but like especially in like group events, because half the time I'm sitting here thinking on myself, but like especially group events, like seeing you like in Austin and stuff, man, it's that's your superpower. I always say that you're the best at asking the right questions to get people out of their own way. I always thought that was just what you do. Even before you came up with the whole concept of get out of your own way, I was always like, man, that's what he does. Like then you put words to it, and I was like, man, he's much better with words than I am. So thanks for having me on, and and honestly helping me through this. Like this is extremely helpful for me. So look forward to where this kind of goes, and I'll keep you up to date.
Hell yeah, dude. If you are stuck, if you're lost, if you're confused, if you're not clear and want help, we've got some ways that you can either get on the show or you can get some resources. If you follow us on Instagram, just go to my handle, Aaron Velky. You can send me a message. You can jump on our website and book a discovery call. You can learn about what we're doing and be a part of this movement to help entrepreneurs, dreamers, creatives, and artists who are all marching towards growth get there faster. So give us a follow. Shoot us a message if you need some help. And if you want to be on the show for one of these coaching calls, let me know. Appreciate you being here.